Thank you, everybody. So I like to dress nice. I do this because I've read that successful people dress nice, and that being dressed nice, you can project successfulness even if you haven't achieved it. Even if all that you've achieved is not getting married and starting your own family, so your worried mother still buys you suits for Christmas. I've also read that successful people get up early in the morning, and I've checked it out. I've set my alarm, gone outside, I see them. They're out there jogging, carrying their yoga mats, doing boot camps in the park. All things that I could be doing, maybe should be doing, but in my defense, I really don't want to. So I found what's worked for me is I combine the two. I dress nice and get out early in the morning. And if you do that, you can trick some of these successful people into thinking you're one of them. You may get a nod or a head wave, and then you fooled yourself into thinking you do belong. And that gives me the energy to go out and crush my day, or at the very least, not have to start with a coffee, which is good because comedy doesn't pay me enough to afford Starbucks every day.
So here we go. I'd like to tell you a story about kind of how I got into stand-up comedy. Kind of as long as I can remember, I've always liked to make people laugh. It hasn't necessarily been a conscious decision. It's just something I like to do. Whether it's breaking tension or just thinking what's funny just because I like making people laugh. I don't know. It's never been, like I said, a conscious effort. It's just something I've always enjoyed. I think a moment that kind of sticks out for me, my sister was going to law school, and my mom has us sit around when we're eating dinner before someone's going away or something and say one nice thing about the person that's leaving. In my family, we're all jokesters, so it's always like a backhanded compliment. And my sister Anna said something about me. She said, what I like about Vin is no matter what happens and he gets in trouble, he can always say something funny enough that he's not in trouble anymore. And I always kind of took that moment with me. I was like, oh yeah, I like being funny. Getting into stand-up, I don't remember a decision at one point that I was like, I want to do stand-up comedy. It's a hobby for me, but it was sometime in college. I remember somebody doing stand-up comedy at a talent show and being like, that'd be fun. And I like different stand-up comics. So I found myself when I was 21 years old. I was in D.C. I was interning at a software sales company. I just looked up open mics and I found one. And I wrote some jokes. And I got an open mic. I got 3 minutes. And I did stand-up, and it went pretty well. It was funny. I'm not saying it was good enough for a Netflix special or something, but it was good. And then I tried a new time. I was writing new jokes. And I went in with kind of a cocky attitude. I was like, oh, I'm good at this. I wrote these jokes down somewhat. I know where they're going. And I got up on stage, and I had maybe had a couple too many drinks. And it's nerve-wracking. As much as I love it, it's nerve-wracking. And I got up there, started telling my jokes. They weren't going well, and it just went very poorly. And after the show, all my friends were like, oh no, it was good. It wasn't your best, but it was good, which since then I've known never to trust friends as actual critics because they just want to tell you nice things, which is nice, and but it's not really helpful. So that I learned a lot of lessons there. There needs to be a little bit of an edge. Like there has to be some stakes. There were no stakes for me that time. I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm not concerned at all. And so I actually didn't perform well. So I realized being too comfortable could be an issue because you're not on your game. I always told myself I was going to do more. But I got in this kind of position where I was like, oh, I'll sign up for stand-up when I've written some stand-up, but I wouldn't write stand-up because I didn't have any upcoming shows. And it wasn't a huge priority of mine. I was working a job, so kind of for a few years went by the wayside. I had a friend who was going into the Navy. He was going to the Navy SEAL program. And he was like, oh, something I'd always love to do is stand-up comedy. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do a show. So I signed him and I up for a show, and then I signed myself up for 2 other shows that week just because I was like, I'd like to run through multiple shows in a week. It was fun. They all went well, and I was like, okay, I'm back into this. I'm going to do stand-up again. The following day, or maybe the day after, I got an email from the people that organized the open mic night I was performing at, and they were like, hey, would you like to be in our showcase on Friday? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So That went well. I got a bunch of people to come out. I made $20. So I officially became a professional stand-up comedian. It was fun. So it was an interesting reaction because something I've always wanted to do is stand-up comedy in New York. And it's kind of one of the reasons I never did it. I was like, oh, I'll go to New York and then I'll do stand-up comedy. But I wasn't moving to New York, so I was like, I'm going to do it here. I'm going to do it now. And I think that was an opportunity to get in front of a real audience that paid tickets to see, a bunch of comedians, but I was one of them. That's something that I accomplished in a week of doing stand-up in D.C., and that would take me years in New York. And I think that was kind of an eye-opening experience. It was like, oh, D.C. might actually be a good place to do this. Because as much as it's not New York, L.A., or Chicago, and you don't have the same opportunities, it's not Boise, Idaho, where there's nothing. I'm sorry to the people of Boise. It's enough. And you can get in front of real audiences and you can work with real comedians. I learned a lot. It's fun. I know more, like I tried some stuff that wasn't necessarily on brand for me and went well sometimes and sometimes it didn't. And I realized, stop trying to do so much. Focus on the core of who you are. But for me, stand-up comedy is an interesting thing. So it's something I would love to do professionally. But some of it is, is that realistically something that I would ever pursue professionally? I don't think so. It's a lot of time and energy, and you have to sacrifice a lot for that. I think I have decent aptitude for it, and it's something I really do enjoy. Some of the happiest I ever am is when I'm on stage and I'm making people laugh. I know a lot of people say, like, I can't imagine that. I would be so nervous. I get more nervous going before I get on stage. I like to compare it to like going on a first date. For me, how I feel, it's like you're like, okay, this is gonna work. I'm going on a date, and then like right beforehand, you're like, I don't know, like there's a lot of pressure on this and everything like that. And then you get there and you're like, okay, this isn't that bad. This is just dinner with a person. It's so freeing, and it's one of the happiest things that I do. I love doing it. It's a great way to interact with people, and I think people get scared of that because there's so much attention on you, but it doesn't really harm you, and you have to kind of have that mentality that if people don't like your jokes, it's not a referendum on who you are, or even how funny you are. That's how funny you are in that moment, and if it's not that funny, then guess what, the world keeps spinning.